Hi guys, this is Jacqui Cooper with J. Cooper Travels, and today is the start of a new year. And so with all the starts of a new year, we do what we always do. We always kind of reflect both on our personal goals, on our business goals, on our health, on our finances. So as part of my New Year's resolution with J. Cooper Travels, which as a podcast is to talk about both our travels around the world, from a travel perspective, but also from a personal journey perspective. I've invited back one of my guests from before, and we're going to talk about different parts of financial planning from the educational perspective. This is not advising you, giving you specific advice for your own personal area, but just kind of talking about what's out there, what might you want to think about in your portfolio. And as I want to welcome you back to the podcast, and I would love for you to kind of share more about what you're doing and everything else. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. Um, yeah, let me say a little bit about myself for those who maybe didn't see the other podcast. I'm retired after 25 years of helping families with their grief. I was a bereavement counselor, worked in hospices, and some years after that, I was recruited to work with life insurance. And initially, I balked at that. I thought, no, I didn't want to do that. We'd had some bad experience with life insurance. And I thought, well, there's only term or whole life, and I just didn't appeal to me at all. Then I learned of the many different uses of life insurance and how life insurance had become more modern, been brought up to date, and so now I am doing that. I see myself in helping families avoid many of the mistakes that we made over the years with our life insurance and with other finances, and also with paying down our debts. And where I'm working, it achieves both of those. So it's a very good fortune for me and for us. So that's a little bit about me. I work with World Financial Group, and I don't know if there's anything else you want to know at this point,
Well,
Jackie.
I know that a lot of the listeners are maybe not near a place where they actually can write down your contact information. But for those that are listening, there will be information in the block below the podcast as well as below the YouTube. So why don't you give them, just so that way they can have access to it, to your email. Okay, as we continue our discussion, they might want to reach out to you directly. So what is your email that they can mentally take a note of, as well as when they have a chance, going back to the podcast to write it down?
Yeah, the easiest email to remember is scottnsd@gmail.com. That's Scott with two T's, then the letter N, the letter S, the letter D. I'm in San Diego. At gmail.com, scottnsd@gmail.com.
That's great. So I know that today we had, there's so many things that we've been talking about off camera, but we had talked about the idea of term insurance. And so what exactly is that? I know I have that. What age range should someone maybe think about that? And give us a little bit more knowledge in case someone's not really aware of what that product is, because there's so many different things out there these days. And so the purpose of this podcast, for everyone who's listening, is to give you an overview, and definitely reach out to Scott for more specifics to your own personal situation, but give us a little bit of guidance. What is it? Why do people get it?
Yeah, in simplest terms, it's insurance that you would get for anywhere from 10 to 30 years. It's really inexpensive compared to other kinds of insurance. It's a little bit like the insurance you have on your car. You don't earn anything on the side. You pay the insurance on your car. It's there if you need it. Uh, Lord hopes you don't need it, but if you do, you have the insurance and you can get the fenders fixed or whatever. Well, this is life insurance. I see life insurance as income replacement. So if you're a breadwinner of your family, and God forbid something happens to you, then you have this insurance to cover that. but it's just good for the 30 years. When the 30 years is up or 20 years or whatever, we always recommend the longer term. Uh, and I can go into more detail on that if you want. But when that time is up, then the insurance, if you haven't needed it, you haven't needed it, and you don't get any money back, you can't get loans on it or anything like that. But it's there, best for young people that are starting out. They maybe can't afford permanent insurance, other kinds of insurances, but this is just something to protect them, protect their income, while they're raising their family, they're putting the kids through school or whatever they're doing earlier in their life. Later on, as their income increases and so forth, then they can add other forms of insurance. They can also convert this to other forms of insurance. Um, Anything else you'd like to know about that?
So when you say protect your income or their income, what do you mean exactly? Can you give an example?
Sure, sure. Say I'm, in my 20s or 30s again, and say I'm making $50,000 a year. If something happened to me and my wife had to bury me, pay the burial expenses and so forth, um, that would get expensive. That would use up a big chunk of whatever we might have saved. Um, and if I didn't have an adequate amount of that insurance, that is, if I had $1 million, if I was insured for $1 million, then that would be nice. She would be okay for a while, for quite a while, perhaps. If I had a smaller amount, if I had $25,000 of insurance, that would be enough to get me buried and maybe a month or two on the mortgage. So it's important to consider how much insurance you have, but even the higher amounts is relatively inexpensive. If you give up a Starbucks a day, you could probably afford it. So it's important to get the right amount to cover your expenses if the unforeseen should happen. Again, it's like car insurance. You can't make loans on it. You don't get anything back at the end of the time of 30 years, and as expected that the breadwinner survives and so forth, and that's good.
So with in getting term, what is again, it might depend obviously on the size of the package, but usually about how much a month is it, the range?
It's off the top of my head, I would say $100, $200 a month, depending upon, again, how old you are. Obviously, the younger you are, the more likely you're to be healthy, uh, and the less expensive it will be for you. And it depends on how much you want to have it for. If it's for 50,000, it's going to be quite a bit less than for 100 or 200,000. I can't give you a quote off the top of
No,
my
and
head.
I wouldn't want you to, not
Yeah.
on a pod show like this. So if you are, so one of the things that you had mentioned, okay, is that if you're in your 20s or 30s, that you might want to think about doing this, and then when you get a little bit older, you can look at transitioning that to a different type of policy. When you get older, what sort of policy might you want to look at? What's the next step of policy?
Yeah, there there are a lot of ways that you could go. It depends on your income and your plans, and whether you feel like you want to keep increasing your income or whether you feel like you've got enough income set aside in your policy that you just want to not lose your principal. One of our favorite policies, that is the policies that most people seem to like the most, is what we call an IUL. Uh, and what that does, it's an indexed universal life insurance. And what that means is that it has a floor. The principal is protected. So in a down year, if say it's not tied to it mirrors the market, but it doesn't have the money in the market.
Which
And
market? Which
in
market
the
is
stock market, it'd be
stock
the
market?
S&P 500, or there's a number of different indexes that it mirrors, but the money is kept in the insurance policy. It's not in the market. And what that means is they can offer a floor so that the principal is not lost. If it's a down year, the market goes down 15, 20, 40%, uh, then like it did in 2008, the policy doesn't get any better, but it doesn't lose any money. So you don't lose your principal ever in these policies. So you're safe, the principal is safe, and you can still go up. So if you have a year where the stock market or your what you're mirroring goes up, say 10%, then you'll go up 10%. And it'll stay, that'll be the new floor. So if the following year it goes down 10%, you stay at that 10% that you just earned. So it's a really popular policy. The money goes in there. The money that goes in there, you borrow at if you want it for income producing. And that money then that you take out, that you borrow later on, because it's a life insurance policy, you don't pay taxes, or you pay taxes on the money that just out that you gained if you put in pre-tax money.
So, one of the things that I have been talking to you about, sometimes you shared with me a lot of different statistics that actually were very interesting. You talked about credit cards, which a lot of individuals have. Would you like to share just some of the things you were talking about in terms of how credit cards increase in the debt, and that's another reason why we all need to be looking at how are we financially planning right now, because of the long term and the short term.
Sure, sure. I was surprised to find that credit cards double. There's a rule of 72 that as you take 72 and divide by the interest rate on, say, credit cards, uh, then that'll tell you how often the money in the credit card will double if no money was paid. That is, when you pay on a credit card, the amount you pay isn't affected, but the money that's left in it is affected. And if you have a 21% credit card, that is, if your credit score is below 570, you'll likely get your credit card will be 21%. That will double every 3.5 years approximately. A credit card that you have a really good super prime credit score at 720 or more, that'll still double every 5.5 years. So that was pretty scary to me to see that there's that doubling going on. And to contrast that, the average savings in this country is 0.05%. I'm sure everybody's aware. You put your money in the bank and you ask them to save it for you. They're giving us very little these years. That would take 1,440 years to double. So if we give our money to a bank, that we get very little growth on it. Whereas if we go to that same bank and ask to borrow some money, it's going to be expensive if we're not careful. If we pay the credit card every month, then this doesn't affect it at all. There's no interest rate. This is interest rate on the money that we don't pay back.
Yes, it is very interesting, the amount of money that we get from the banks and the contrast on the credit cards. Exactly. You had also mentioned another interesting fact. You were talking about Social Security, and a lot of us look at, maybe not so much when we're young, but as we get closer to that age, we look at what will Social Security provide for us. What was that stat that you were talking to me about before?
Sure. In 2019, the average wage earner in the United States, average wage earned, is $51,916.27. Is what I looked up, and the average Social Security retirement benefit in June of this last year was $18,000. So if you're the average wage earner, you're making $51,000. But if you retired this year, you'll get that's not even half of what you're making in Social Security, and that's before you take out any insurance for a Medicare Part B, which is for your supplemental. So that would take out another $100 or so, depending on what insurance you get. So that's a big chunk. And when you here's something that astounded me when I looked at it, that if you're making 100,000 at age 35 and you continue to make that 100,000 until you retire at say 65, that comes to $3 million that you've made as a breadwinner for your family. Um, that's a lot. That's to make that up in your Social Security and the money that you earn. Uh, that's not gonna match at all. Your Social Security is gonna come out still at 18 or 20,000, maybe 26,000 if you're making that much money. Um, so I think to have that much money saved or to have it in an IUL or an insurance policy, which you can do if you're making that much money. It's not hard to do, but people think, well, I have a 50,000. That sounds like a lot. I have 100,000, or especially if it's a group life insurance where you work. But if you think you're going to leave, if whenever you leave that job, that insurance stops. Uh, you can pay to continue it, but when you get insurance at that retirement age, that's pretty expensive. Um, so that is a consideration to plan ahead, to get a good policy, to start saving money early on, so that when you do retire, you can be making a good income from the money that is growing in your life insurance policy.
I would agree with you. I know that, when I was younger, I wasn't thinking about this at all. And so I know that you and I are going to have conversations down the road about financial literacy and teaching it to teenagers and young adults, because that's really important. But I would say that for those who are listening that are in the 20s, just out of college, and or even a little bit older than that, if you don't have a term policy just yet, or if you don't have someone that you can give a call to, and just kind of brainstorm as to what your financial health looks like. Scott is definitely someone that I would trust and say, reach out to him. But if there's someone within your own local community that you trust, it's just important that no matter where you are in your life, that you start asking these questions. So down the road, you've made that plan. And I know it might sound like $50 or $100 a month is a lot, but in the long run, it actually is. These are like seeds being planted, and those years go fast. If you think about like what you did last New Year's, how fast did this last year go? So just think about how fast all those years go. And by the time that you actually need it, if you're planting those seeds now, then you will have what you need down the road. Any last minute thoughts from, this is a continuing conversation, but any last minute thoughts?
Sure. Oh, I'd love to go into all these different areas. I'm just discovering this myself. It's someone who didn't do this when I should have, and now I'm almost 80 and I'm needing to work because I didn't. Because I thought, well, it's going to be fine, and I've always been fine, and I'll continue to be fine. Well, it doesn't always work out that. I'm very fortunate to have work that I like a lot, and I'm helping other people with, and it's meaningful, and all of that. So we're okay. But I could have been working at Walmart just as easy. Work, greeting people there, or doing something that's not quite as interesting and doesn't make as much. So I think it's not fun stuff to think about when we're younger, but I think it's important because it does, 5 years, 20 years, doesn't seem that long ago that I was just was working, and had a good income. But it's been 20 years almost.
So I'm going to throw something else out to my listeners. I mean, we are talking about, the different products, which obviously, everyone will need to investigate for themselves. But if you are even thinking about a career change, or if you're thinking about going into the career that Scott's in, or, you know, even doing things that I'm doing, reach out to us also from that perspective, because, you know, we both have been career switchers, and we are both entrepreneurs in different ways. And so that's also another thing to think about, you know, just not just from the financial planning from the insurance side, is thinking about alternative income streams and planning so you have more than one income stream. And so I'll throw that out there as an aside, and also just as another avenue for everyone in this new year to think about. So as I mentioned before, the contact information for Scott will be down below in the podcast as well as the YouTube. But Scott, do you want to say your email one more time so they have it really easy?
Sure. And I'm going to add that I wanted to grow my team. So we're doing that continually. But my email is Scott NSD, Scott, the letter N, the letter N, the letter SD at gmail.com.
Yep. And for those that want to reach out to me, it's really easy. It's jcoopertravels@gmail.com. And again, thank you so much for subscribing and listening both to the podcast as well as the YouTube channel. I appreciate all my listeners, and I know it's growing. So thank you so much. And thank you, Scott, for being on. I look forward to our next conversation. I know that for those that are listening, we're just covering the surface of it. There's a lot of details, but that's why you need to reach out to someone who's an expert like Scott, because he can actually dive a lot deeper into it. And everyone, Happy New Year.